Hi, Michael.
Hello, Victoria, and everyone watching. Welcome back to another one of our episodes. And we have been seeing some really, really cool numbers on YouTube as far as you guys coming out to support us. So we want to say we truly appreciate it. And it's been really, really cool to feel the support coming in as we continue to bring you guys these life lessons, and it's kind of humbling. So thanks for continuing to come out to support us.
So today we are going to talk about a man named Richard Schwartz who created a model called Internal Family Systems. Actually, we're going to talk a little bit more about his model and not about his name. But he is another person that talks about the roles that we get stuck in our families and in our lives. Last session, or the last video we made, we talked about common roles that people play in families, including the rescuer role, the perpetrator role, and the victim role. But people also play roles such as caretaker. They sometimes feel like they're in the exile role, then meaning that they're on the out in their families. And how do you get off of or out of that situation of being stuck in the family role or the role with your friends? So Richard Schwartz came up with what he called the C words. Mm-hmm. And these are the words that we need to have in order to know that we're not playing a role. And of course, you're not going to necessarily be in all of them, but the most important one that you can be in is what I would call the curious role. Mm-hmm. Because if you are able to be curious about the point of view of the other people and working to understand their point of view, you are interested in what's going on, you are probably not going to be stuck in one of those roles. And this is actually a hard thing to do if you are triggered or you are playing the same drama, the same caretaking role, the same rescuer role over and over again. So the first one I always emphasize is curious. The other C words, some of them, I'm sure you could come up with some of your own, are connected, compassionate, courageous, creative, calm, confident, and congruent. And I add the word congruent because I think it's so very important for us to be able to be who we are on the inside and also express that on the outside, which again sort of goes back to our original stance that if you don't have enough connection in your life, you're going to tend to have an addiction. So that also means knowing who you are and being able to express it out in the world.
Okay, so it's context time. So I see the word curious. So are we saying curious about life, curious about travel, curious? What are you referring to specifically as far as where we're going with our talk today? Curious about what?
I think curious about life is a great example, like knowing what it is in the world that we're interested in. But in this context, I was using the word curious about the people around you. So I often have couples come in and they are just not curious about each other. They've already decided that they know what the other person is thinking and feeling, or they know that they're being victimized, and they are not looking at, what the other person's point of view is. So in this case, I'm more talking about trying to understand the point of view of the person that you tend to get into cyclical patterns with.
Okay, so curious, oh, honey, how was your day? Or, hey, how was that new couple you saw today? Or, oh, you went out hiking. Was there anything cool in the park? I mean,
so more like
curious?
Your partner comes in and says, I'm really frustrated because you don't seem to be following through with the dishes or the things that we're supposed to be doing, and we agreed on. And I'm frustrated and angry that you are not doing your part. And a curious person wouldn't just come out and attack, which is the persecutor role. They would try to understand the other person's point of view. They might not change their mind, but they would say, I'm noticing that, we made a commitment for each of us to, do some of the housework, and you were going to empty the garbage daily and it's never getting emptied. I'm just wondering what's going on with you. I don't think that's the best example, but just wanting to understand the other person's point of view. Like maybe a better example is, I'm noticing you're working 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day, and we agreed that time together is essential for our relationship. Can you help me understand what is going on?
So you just want to make sure there's not some avoidance process happening there.
Well, the big thing is you don't turn to the other person and say, you are selfish, you don't care about our relationship. It's obvious because you're working all the time that I'm not important to you, and just a whole bunch of you statements without trying to understand the other person's point of view. You might end up in the end of this conversation having a request like, hey, I'm lonely, this isn't working for me. I really want you to consider that 12 hours a day does not mean we're actually having a relationship.
Gotcha.
But that getting rid of that you word and trying to understand the other person's point of view is going to make it much more likely that you're going to have a conversation that gets you somewhere.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to avoid saying you when you're having a conversation with another person, especially if there's emotions involved. You don't want to, I guess, denigrate that person to an it.
Right.
So it's hard even for me, it was like, say for instance, you come home from work and it's like, where's my partner, where's my spouse, where's my girlfriend? Then they finally show up and it's like, I thought you said you would be done by 5.
Right.
And the word you is in that sentence. You can't,
Yeah.
So it's really hard. And I guess that's because there's like an emotional component to it. It's like, I guess kind of slipping kind of into victim on that one a little bit.
Exactly. You're triggered a little bit and you're not feeling important. But if you point your finger at the other person and say, you don't seem to think I'm important, you're probably not going to get anywhere, right? They're going to go immediately into defensive and go, well, yeah, I'm just, every time I come home, you're mean or you pick a fight. Why would I want to be home, right? And off you are to the races. Nobody's being curious.
Everyone's being avoidant.
But the question is, when you notice yourself slipping into those kinds of sequences where you're not able to break out of a fight or a back and forth tennis match of yous, you got to ask yourself, am I able to exemplify any of these traits? And if you can't, you're triggered and you're playing a role and you're not gonna get where you want to go. You're not gonna get connected, which is the second word, and I think maybe the second most important word, because what we've been talking about over and over is if you don't have enough connection, there's a good chance you're gonna have an addiction. What does it feel like to actually be connected? What it means is you're listening, they're listening, it's reciprocal. You don't have one person in the conversation that's, I've watched, again, all my couples, it's like one person will just kind of take up all the airtime. Or I'm sure you've been around people where they don't really care what you have to say. They are just going to talk and talk and talk, and your job is to listen. Boring, right? To me, that's like, I don't have time for that. I spend enough time in my life being around disconnected people, and I also, have in my life not been a very connected person. But that, I've done so much work that it's not interesting to me be around someone that never shuts up, to put it bluntly.
Well, there might be a conversation in that somewhere. So now we understand the connected part, and that does carry well with our overall theme of addiction and not being connected to have that avenue to.
Right.
So then we see compassionate.
This is another one that's really tricky when you are listening to someone in a victim position, right? They're going on and on and on about nobody likes them, they can't move forward because their boss at work sucks, their husband doesn't love them and obviously wants to get away, their kids are selfish and, are not respectful of you as a parent, etc., etc. And it's not like you're not maybe right sometimes, but again, we want to have a conversation that's fruitful. So curious about the other person's point of view and compassionate that this person, for example, in the victim position, are stuck. So that's what that's about. And of course, these rest of these are fairly self-evident. Being courageous, taking that risk to say something that normally you wouldn't say. And I've certainly heard people tell me, well, if I'm courageous and tell my mother that she constantly interrupts me and favors John, my brother, and she starts to cry because she sees me as persecutory, I'm supposed to, get into the rescuer role. But the courageous person allows their mother to cry because maybe they need to be sad, and doesn't denigrate them, but just says in a compassionate way, yeah, that must feel painful for me to point out something that you have not wanted to look at. That's what courage looks like. It's not rescuing someone from their grief when they're sad. Maybe you are supposed to be sad. It's allowing them to feel sad. And there's all kinds of examples of that, of how to be courageous in your conversations or how to be courageous out in the world. And then, of course, I think that people that are not stuck in a role are much more able to be creative in their life. And creativity, I think, is an essential aspect of being alive. If we just, walk through the same patterns over and over and over again and do the same things every single day, there's going to be a deadness in our life. So creativity is really important, and it takes you out of those roles that we're talking about. And then, of course, if you really want people to hear you, you have to sound calm. You may be saying all the right words, but if you're saying it in a strident voice with your fists clenched, the other person is not going to want to hear you. They're going to be like, yeah, you're saying it right, but I can feel what is really going on in your body. I just have to look at those fists.
You're saying the right things in the wrong way.
Exactly, or the finger pointing, or especially tone of voice. I think people don't realize how, a lot of people that have that kind of strident, strong tone of voice don't realize that is something that is jarring for other people. And finally, confident, knowing that you're okay, not worrying or pulling back because you think people are going to judge you, being able to speak your truth. And the last word I always add this is congruent. Are you being able to identify what's really going on with you and share that with the other person in a congruent way?
So, based on these attributes, the C words we've covered, if you were to isolate the ones that are the most difficult to master, especially in a relationship, which ones should people, if you were like, today I'm going to work on this so I can be a better partner or a better coworker or a better brother or sister, which ones do you see as being the most challenging in your day-to-day practice?
Well, I think that if you are operating out of a triggered place, all of them are challenging. But if you're operating out of the triggered place and you just think to yourself, the one attribute I'm going to try to bring here is curiosity, that would be the one I would focus on, because you cannot be triggered and curious at the same time. Once you're triggered, you tend to go into fight or flight or freeze, and curiosity is just out the window. So although I think these are all very important, I would put that at the top. I would also say that if you cannot speak in a way that other people are going to understand you or be able to listen, you're not going to get anywhere. So having that sense of calm is a very, very important C word, in my opinion. But again, you're not going to have these all at the same time. And I always say at least 50%, right? Like you got to be 52% into your authentic self, your true self, in order to even consider being able to have a conversation that is going to go somewhere.
Okay. So I guess as I look over the short list of things, calm kind of sticks out. I know a lot of people that are triggered typically aren't calm.
Absolutely.
And I guess that's like time for that internal timeout. You know, what am I going on about? What am I spooling up to do here? You know, it's like, am I overreacting? Did I pull the trigger for my trigger too soon? So, no, I guess, you know, just taking one a day to make a few moments of reflection just to see where you are. Unfortunately, I don't believe that there's a scale for any of these, but as far as, you know, the curious part, totally on board.
Yeah. So I think that about covers this. If you have any questions, as usual, reach out and we will have our email at the bottom of the page. And most importantly, if you are enjoying what we have to say, please push like, or even better, follow us.
Thank you for that public service announcement. No, guys, seriously, thank you for supporting us and continue to come out to watch. So we will see you soon with our next topic. Until then, take care, be well, and remember, remain curious.
Absolutely.